Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to uLaw's webinar on Friday afternoon. I welcome everyone who's joined me today for our non-CPD webinar. So today's webinar, again, has not been accredited for any CPD credits, but it's going to be a session where we walk you through certain very core features and functionalities that we have very recently added into the uLaw platform that enables sole practitioners, as they grow their business, to continue using the same platform and extend it to their extended enterprise, whether that's additional co-workers that are going to be working with them, or whether that be assistants that are going to help them with certain components or aspects of their business, or even if they're going to actually hire a uLaw certified bookkeeper or their own bookkeeper to help them with bookkeeping services, as well as any accounting-related services that the legal firm requires. Okay, so today's webinar, the topic is going to be the use of uLaw in a multi-user firm, in a multi-user legal firm. I once again want to reiterate that today's webinar is not accredited for any CPD credits. We encourage you to watch any of our previous videos on our YouTube channel with the label CPD on it for specific CPD requirements. And we're, of course, going to have a few more CPD sessions in the upcoming weeks as well. Okay, so this is a particular interesting topic to a large member of our audience, as uLaw as a company evolved to meet the needs of our customer base. Okay, so we are a Canadian legal accounting, business accounting, practice management software company. We pretty much provide a unified platform that understands and takes care of the Law Society compliance requirements, as well as any CRA requirements with regards to corporate tax, as well as any jurisdictional taxes like HST, GST, PST, right? And we're continuing to evolve our product to serve the sole practitioners, the small law firms, and legal firms. And through the evolution of the existing customers that we had sole practitioners who worked hard, grew their business from a single user to multiple users collaborating on the very same platform that they used to manage a single user. And we obviously had to promote our product to now manage and maintain the same level of proficiency, compliance, CRA requirements when it comes to a multi-user ecosystem for that same firm. Okay? So today's webinar is going to actually have a lot of demonstration about the key capabilities of the product, when it's specifically concerning with how multiple individuals in the same firm can collaborate, whether that's on a individual file or work on their individual files independently, collaborate for business requirements, expenses, etc. Also work with a bookkeeper for monthly reconciliation or expense management. Okay, so we're going to talk about all the scenarios from a multi-user firm and the features that uLaw provides to have a very consistent experience. Now, like every other uLaw webinar, today's webinar has a specific agenda. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to learn how to use uLaw in a multi-user firm ecosystem, the permission and the user restrictions that the owner of the firm can apply on the usage of uLaw with their extended enterprise. Okay, so we're going to first talk about, as the owner of the company, as you extend uLaw to other colleagues in the firm, we're going to showcase how you still have the control or can provide certain restrictive access based on your comfort to this colleagues of yours. Okay, it's totally left to your discretion whether you want to provide restrictions or not, but the opportunity to restrict is available. Now, once you've looked at that, we'll also look at how in a multi-user ecosystem, colleagues can now collaborate, whether that's lawyers, legal assistants, or the paralegals working, how all these different users can work together on a single file. And we'll talk about a simple use case of a collaborative environment. We'll talk about how invoices can reflect the level of collaboration that has happened within a particular file, because many times for certain types of work and many times with clients insisting, it becomes important for legal firms to outline who exactly has done the work and at what specific rate, because that may be something that you had decided upon within your retainer letter, right? You may have signed up to say that my assistant would always do my client intake. Maybe that's a new policy in the company to say that my assistant is going to work on the client intake, ensure all the checklist documents are made available prior to even that initial client conversation or intake conversation with the lawyer, him or herself, followed by any other collaborative work that's required by other colleagues in the firm, right? It's important for the client now to know who has done what work and at what rate was that accomplished. So we'll show you how invoices in uLaw automatically reflect that and the settings and the opportunities for that. Now, initially you were a sole practitioner. Let's assume you've evolved, or maybe by design you are a multi-user law firm to begin with. The owner of the firm obviously requires as much as data or information about the efficiency, the revenue that's being brought in, the time that is being spent by the different employees or the participants or colleagues within the firm, right? These reports, the dashboards, and the data elements allows the owner of the firm to make, again, a very well-informed decision about the hygiene of the business and how the firm can now grow to greater heights. Or if there are certain things that are not being tracked properly, this gives them an opportunity to track them, have a design for all individuals in the firm to be on the same page. Okay, so we're going to talk about how timesheet reporting truly outlines both the effort spent as well as the time spent by the individual contributor within the firm. And finally, we'll talk about a simple use case of a multi-user collaboration at a business level. So we're talking about business accounting aspects of it. We'll talk about how the law firm will now collaborate with a third-party bookkeeper or accountant, and how you can collaborate to work with that party as well. Okay? So hopefully you're all excited. You've got your coffees, teas, so that over the next 40 to 45 minutes, it's pretty much going to be a fun-filled, packed, demonstrative webinar. Once again, for all our friends who joined us a bit late, I want to reiterate that today's webinar is going to be the use of the uLaw product in a multi-user firm. The webinar is not accredited for any CPD credits, but we do have plans for CPD webinars in the upcoming weeks, or you could always visit our YouTube channel, and any topic that's labeled with CPD on it does fetch you the appropriate CPD credits. Okay? And for those who are joining us for the first time and don't know who we are a proud Canadian company offering a legal accounting, practice management, and a business accounting platform to legal professionals across Canada. And our mission is to provide a very competitively priced, compliant, and a very Canadian platform for legal professionals to stay both compliant from a CRA standpoint as well as compliant from a law society standpoint. Okay? We do visit our website. We're at uLawPractice.com. We do offer 30-day, no-obligation free trials, and we offer onboarding sessions to help you understand the product and if it's a great fit for your firm. Okay. Now, for purposes of today's demonstration, I'm going to assume or build a little use case. Okay, so fundamentally, in most of my webinars, or in our webinars at uLaw, we use this fictitious legal practitioner by the name Roger Moore. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through how I actually have, I believe Roger Moore already logged in. There you go. So I'm actually logged in as Mr. Roger Moore, who is the owner of this law firm. Okay, let's assume he's the owner. Now, Roger Moore was a sole practitioner, but for today's demonstration, let's assume that Roger Moore's law firm has now grown to include an assistant. It has grown to now include a co-worker, could be a fellow lawyer or another paralegal in the firm, as well as the law firm has now hired a uLaw bookkeeper. So today, uLawPractice not only offers the product, we also offer our services if needed at a very competitively priced offering. Whether that you use the law firm uses the uLaw bookkeepers or their own bookkeepers or accountants, we want to showcase how you can also collaborate with someone outside your firm for specific needs. Okay, so that's the fourth user within the firm. And to begin with, we're going to talk about the concept of co-workers. Okay, so in uLaw, within our contacts menu option, you have this particular group called co-workers. If I were to just quickly click on it, you're going to see a few other co-workers of Mr. Roger Moore. So you've got Mr. Wolverine, who is a solicitor barrister, so is an L2 or a lawyer, who's a co-worker. We've got Ms. Rogue Lawrence, who is a legal assistant in the firm, and we've got Mr. Magneto, who is a bookkeeper, a third-party bookkeeper who's going to help Roger Moore and his law firm with some of the expense management compliance components. Okay? So keep in mind I'm going to be using different users. Wolverine is the co-worker of the firm, Ms. Rogue is the assistant, and Magneto is the accountant or bookkeeper user profile. Now for Mr. Roger Moore, under Settings, there's a particular tab called Permissions. Okay? When you were a sole practitioner or when Roger Moore was a sole practitioner, he probably wouldn't have had the need to really utilize this particular tab. It's always been available since the time we introduced the multi-user feature, but if you haven't grown to that size, you probably haven't never used it. So this is where you, as the owner of the company, as I said, there are three fundamental roles. You have an assistant user role, and you have a co-worker user role, and then you have an accountant user role. So you can now associate or restrict permissions of what a particular user role within your firm can actually view or not view. Okay, so for example, you have the assistant. You've said yes to accessing your contacts menu option. You've said yes to accessing the matter information. In fact, you've also said yes to accessing the accounts. So let me show you what that means. I'm going to now walk you through. So I'm logged in as the assistant, or it says admin, but truly it's the assistant account. Okay, so I've logged in. And if you can notice, I click on accounts, and assistant Ms. Rogue actually does have access to all this information. Now, certain law firms may find that this information is sensitive and it's not for everyone to consume. So if you decide to choose that, Roger Moore decides to say that, all right, yes, contacts, matters, maybe even calendar. And again, you can see he has now restricted the access to any documents and reports, right, for the assistant. That's why you see when you log in as the assistant, technically you would see a document generation tab, but you don't see it for the assistant. So let's go one step further. Let us say, let's not even provide access to the accounts menu option. Okay, just restrict them. So it's as easy as that. It's a Boolean option, yes or no. Do you want to give them that option? You say no, and you hit save. And all that the assistant has to do is sign out, because it does require because this being a cloud-based user system, so I'm just going to log in. as Roger Practice, and I'm going to say assistant. And this is for the purposes of today's demonstration, but if this is going to be an actual user, this would be the name of Rogue, whatever is the first name, last name. Okay, so let's assume Ms. Rogue is logging in as the assistant account for Roger. And if you remember, she had access to the accounting information. She did have access to being able to access the accounts menu option. And now we've changed that permission. We've changed the restriction, or we've actually restricted the access to, I believe, the accounts. Yep, it says no. So again, I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. So as we wait for the screen to load up here, oh, there it is. Obviously, I'm going to try accessing any other menu option. So let me go ahead and let me try Matters. I guess that's still available. I'm going to click Matters. Perfect. No problem there. But when I try to access the Accounts page, or the menu option, it should throw me an error. And there it is. It says permission denied. To see this particular information, please contact your administrator to grant permission. Okay, so that's the menu level permissioning. Okay. Now, another level of permissioning is, one is at the menu level. So you have contacts, matter, accounts, calendar. The other one is document and reports. Okay. So do you want to provide your assistant with access to analytics, any reporting, or even documents and reports? So if I go into my matters, and I'm logged in as the assistant again, or actually not. If you notice, one of the critical components that in many law firms that the assistant does is not only the client intake, but many times the assistant is the personnel who's actually dealing with generating invoices. Okay, so if access has not been provided for that action to be taken, then you're not going to be able to delegate that work to the assistant. So let's say you recognize that as an issue. Now you want to provide access. You can go ahead and click Save. And of course, you don't see the document generation right now, but I'm going to log back in. Practice, assistant. And I'm going to log in back. So this is just to show you the power of the permissioning, both at the menu level as well as a more granular level within documents and reports. Okay. So first we were able to see how we were able to restrict access to the menu option itself. Now we're going to actually enable a specific document management or reporting capability within a screen. So previously when Ms. Rogue had accessed the Matter screen, she was unable to access the document generation feature. But now Roger Moore, recognizing that that's a problem because he's unable to delegate invoice generation tasks to her, has enabled it. And now Ms. Rogue would be able to see the document generation tab or the menu option, and this is where she would now be able to generate invoices as per the requirements. You could also restrict, if you want, one level further by saying you don't want her to have access to reports, and that's possible from an accounting standpoint as well. Okay? So hopefully this drives home the fundamental component of the feature, which is permissioning and providing restricted access to certain data components within your firm as you grow your firm. So you can be confident that whatever you believe to be sensitive data can very well be restricted, and you don't have to provide access to all of them to have information that they don't need to see. Fantastic. So we have coworkers that we're going to show how we collaborate on a file, and then we obviously have the accountant as well. Let me walk back into my presentation. So really the first step was to look at how permission and user restrictions are enabled. Now, the second level, we're going to talk about a use case where we look at how multiple individuals in the same firm are able to collaborate on a single file. Okay, so let's assume there's a single matter for a particular client and more than one party is involved in collaborating in working towards that file. Okay? And this is just to expand upon the possibilities. This may not be a very day-to-day practical use case, but certainly as a law firm grows, we have seen that this is a very pragmatic use case in a law firm that's growing, where multiple individuals contribute their own part, and we want to capture that and showcase how uLaw captures that within our product. Okay? So let me start with a simple use case of a client intake. Let's take a simple situation where a client gives your law firm a call, or we can assume that the client or prospective client just walked into the office. Let's assume Roger Moore, who's the main lawyer who owns the firm, is not in the office. He's probably at court or is at a meeting. So it's just the assistant who is in the office. So let's kind of take it from there. One of the first steps that the assistant would do is take the information down about this individual. Okay? So let's say you've added a new contact and adding it to the clients, and Ms. Rogue adds that information. And let's just say Mr. Humpty Dumpty. And he was a external referral. So it's always nice to know, how did Mr. Humpty Dumpty get to know that a law firm such as the Roger Moore law firm exists, right? This could be anything. This is alphabetically arranged. This could be a website referral. Could be word of mouth. This could be any lawyer referrals, paralegal referrals, friends, communities, whatever you deem right. So let's go back to being an external referral. You can use the notes to say referred by. Okay. Let's take an address. So I'm going to say 1234 Park Avenue. And I'll mark this as a mailing address. Okay. Let's just say that's the home address. And let's also put a phone number. And if you want, you could also add an email address. Okay. So the assistant who's at the office has now taken all this information and has basically added that information right away. Now, the assistant could also be trained to be an intake specialist, where she knows that right away, before even creating a file, one of the first things to do is to do a conflict screening. So she could right away get into asking for the individual's driver's license or any piece of ID, and in the meantime can run a quick report to see if this particular firm has dealt with someone similar to Humpty Dumpty, whether as a third party or in another matter, or if they've dealt with that individual client themselves. So right away, you're going to go into doing a conflict screening. Keep in mind, all this is done for the same firm, so it's the same database of customers and clients that Ms. Rogue is using, that Roger Moore used to build on when he was a sole practitioner. So that's very important to keep in mind, that it's not a separate database. It's the same database. We've just extended the use of that same database to multiple different users with various different permissions and possibilities. Okay? Let's assume for the purpose of today's demo that there is no conflict. Okay? And then let's say you've trained this rogue to go one step further to just understand what this was about, or at least schedule a conversation with the lawyer. Okay, so you can actually go ahead and do that. Click on the Matter tab, create a specific matter, and this could have been a slip and fall for Mr. Humpty Dumpty. And by the way, here's our conflict screening report. Okay. You can see there's a Humpty Brown. There's also a file for Humpty versus Donald. So you could do further due diligence by searching to see if there's any conflict. So I'm going to say this is a small claim. This is a slip and fall. Slip and fall. Icy side road. Okay, so you've got that basic information. And of course, you can scan documents in. You can associate and start to associate a lot of documents into this file, including the driver's license. You could have other documentation that you may sign up, retainer letter, etc. right away. Okay? So I'm basically just trying to access into a third-party cloud for Google Drive so that there's access to this particular folder. All right. Now let's say this particular event happened this morning. So at about 10 a.m., this particular work was done. Let's assume, for the purpose of the demo, that the legal assistant is able to, she's able to docket this effort. Okay, so she actually does docket this effort. Now this is an interesting part where we're bringing a little bit of that collaboration. So there's this tab called Rate. Each tab in uLaw within the matter has its own significance. This is where we're going to start associating who are the collaborators and at what rate. So you could have more than one assistant in a firm, more than a couple of co-workers in the firm, right? So let's say the assistant one is Ms. Rogue Lawrence, and a co-worker is involved, legal too, and let's say that it's Mr. Wolverine, I guess, yep, Wolverine Jackman. And I'm going to say he's at a rate of $100. So the main lawyer here is obviously at a rate of $200. Now that can be changed, so we can even change that. Let's say this is $200. You can say this is $400. And now you've associated 3 individuals who can technically be collaborating on this file. Okay, so you've got Mr. Wolverine Jackman, you've got Ms. Rogue Lawrence, and of course you have Mr. Roger Moore. Okay. Now all Ms. Rogue has to do now is say, okay, this was at 10 a.m. that I did this. 8 a.m. Initial phone intake. Driver's license. Right? Conflicts done. Matter created. Phone call with Roger set for today at 12 p.m. Okay. Of course, this could be any descriptive information. Let's say she spent a total of an hour on this, and she charges a total of 1 hour at $75 plus tax. Okay? So this is an assistant having done the initial client intake for a client, Mr. Humpty Dumpty, having welcomed him to the office, taken his basic information, and if you've got a scanner within the firm, I can also show you quickly as to how you can bring in that information. Let me quickly go into my drive. And when you connect uLaw to a third-party cloud instance such as Google Drive, and we create automatically for you, for your convenience, a subfolder under your drive, for example, in this case, called uLawPractice. Then we create another one called Matter. And if you have actually created the association, let me go back into this. There's a file number that's associated with this particular matter, right? So there's HD 588251. And what we do, we automatically create a folder within your Google Drive with that same ID. It takes a couple of minutes extra, but it automatically creates that folder for you right under Matter. Okay, and again, you have to associate uLaw with your Gmail account. I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes for it to refresh. So Ms. Rogue can now start to associate scanned documents or any retainer documents at this particular time right under here for this particular file. So we'll look at it a bit later once that folder is automatically created. Okay. Now let's take the example of it being 12 p.m. and Mr. Roger Moore having that phone conversation. Okay. Now Roger Moore, let's assume that he's on the phone. So uLaw today is not only on your web browser, it's also available to you on an app version of it on your phone. So I'm going to quickly shift my presenter role to a phone that I have here, and I'm going to show you how I'm logged into uLaw from a phone app perspective. So I'm basically logged into my phone, into my uLaw app, and I can either go into a Matter because I know, or maybe my assistant gave me a call and said, hey, I've already created the Matter, in which case you can search up that Matter and search by name. So you've got Humpty Dumpty. I'm going to choose that Matter. You can see the initial phone intake was already done for 1 hour. So I could click on the little time icon right here and basically say add a docket. And I'm going to say telephone conversation. And let me say that it was at 12 p.m. and it was for 15 minutes. Okay. And the billable time is about 24 minutes, and I can put a description. Initial discussion and moving forward with Matter. And I'm going to hit the Save button. So now there are 2 dockets available for this particular matter. Okay. Now let me jump back in. And again, purely for the purposes of today's demo, I know this does not sound reasonable or anywhere close to being practical, but I also have logged in as the co-worker for this firm. You can see co-worker, which is Mr. Wolverine. Assuming at 1 o'clock he had to file, he was already at the court and they wanted to do it really fast. They have all the information since this morning and they want to, file this as an application in court. And again, I'm just making this up. Now, if that is the situation, you can actually have Mr. Wolverine do the same thing. He can actually go ahead, search up Mr. Humpty Dumpty. Now he's going to notice that within the dockets, there's a initial intake. He could even change this to PM to reflect it better. Okay. He can also add his own docket. Now he can say, today at 1 p.m. attended court. And he put in attended court and filed. Okay. Now let's assume he spent an hour on it as well. And he's going to bill that same 1 hour. But keep in mind, he's associated automatically as an L2, and the L2 rate is that of $200. So when Mr. Wolverine adds his final docket for this matter, at least for now, you've got 3 different use cases. You've got an assistant who did the initial intake. You then had the main lawyer, Roger Moore, have a phone conversation with the client, and you can see that's come from the app, and it's directly got in here. And then you have another co-worker within the firm also collaborating on the same file from a totally different browser. This could be a different device, or it could be another app that he's using for uLaw. Also collaborating the 1 hour. But the critical component that uLaw has done is that it's taken the individual rates. So it's taken 24 minutes at $400, 1 hour at $75, and 1 hour at the $200 rate. Okay? So really the next step could be where, and you can have a collaboration even at the disbursement level. There it is. The Humpty Dumpty folder is already created. So let's assume Roger Moore actually had coffee with him at that particular time. He could have actually just scanned a receipt as a disbursement for the same file. Okay? So let's just add that just to make this a little bit more interesting. I'm going to switch back to my phone. And now I'm basically going to, in my particular phone, I have access to a phone app of Google Drive. Okay? And there it is. I have my HD 582251. And let's assume I actually had coffee and I have the receipt for that disbursement. I'm basically going to take a snapshot of it and basically say disbursement meals. To make it easier on your staff, you could even do this, put the total, and basically save it. Okay, that's made available right under that file or that matter for Humpty Dumpty. I know it's going to be a lot of back and forth, but trust me, that's the last of it you'd see. Now I'm going to log in as back to the assistant, Miss Rogue. Okay? So this particular file, you could see how collaborative it has been. Within the last 30 minutes or 22 minutes or so, we've had various different components happen. We've had where intake, phone conversation done in a separate instance, attending court, as well as adding a disbursement to it. Now let's assume the situation where Ms. Rogue opens up the documents, okay, and she is able to see that a particular file with a disbursement on it is already in the document. So she sees this automatically right here. So whatever Mr. Roger Moore scanned is automatically available in the same file because of the connection at the Google Drive level. So she says, oh, okay, I probably have to add this into this particular invoice. So she goes in, she says, add new disbursement from general. I'm just going to say meals. Oh, let me do this. Okay. So you can also override taxes depending on where this happened. Of course, this is not an Ontario tax, it's happened somewhere else. You can even say how this happened. So you could basically say, Mr. paid to Starbucks, and Mr. Roger may have used the business credit card to pay for this. The whole point of this whole exercise is to make it convenient for a multi-user situation, okay, to collaborate on the same individual file. And imagine the efficiency and the timeliness of you working collaboratively towards the successful closure of this file. So that would most certainly talk very highly of the user experience with your brand. Okay? And then you use technology to help build that user experience. So not only did you have all those dockets, now you also added the disbursement of $776. Now you can go ahead and generate an invoice. Okay, so the assistant goes in, probably could use the winter theme. And you could say invoice was prepared by Rogue. And this is where comes our next component, which is showcasing the different individuals who were part of this collaboration. If I were to zoom this in a little bit more, you're going to see this, obviously because it's a preview, it has the little watermark. If you notice, you've got the initial phone intake at $400, got the telephone conversation, and then you've got the attended court. Obviously, this is a mistake. The first docket should have been done at the L2 level. You can go ahead and basically say this is an assistant rate. Okay. That would then reflect automatically about the three individuals collaborating. So I'm going to go ahead and generate that invoice so that we can send it off to the client, which has the three dockets plus the $7.76 disbursement. So this is the final example about how three individuals in the firm work together working towards this particular file. Choose our file here. I sincerely appreciate your patience because this takes a bit of an exercise to reflect the work put in by 3 or 4 individuals across various devices. Okay. So once the pre-bill has been approved, technically you could have the assistant send the pre-bill to Roger to get his approval. And when it has been approved, your assistant can basically generate it and send this invoice to the client by email, any other means, print this, mail this to him, whatever is your policy within your company. Okay? So this was another very important aspect of 3 individuals in the firm collaborating, including collaboration at a Google Drive level where you used external content of just a scanned receipt of a disbursement that happened being included into that file. How powerful is that, right? Otherwise, it would have been where you had that receipt in your wallet, got to bring it to the office, scan it, takes time, sometimes you misplace it, and it's all over the place. This way, it's done, it's taken care of, now you're moving on to the next step. So you're going to see your client's going to appreciate the timeliness of your service and the effort that you're putting in to meet those timelines. So let's have a look at that invoice. Perfect. Now if you see the client initial phone intake was rendered by the legal assistant, Rogue Lawrence, at her cost of $75 an hour, and she spent an hour. And then you had the telephone conversation. You can even go to the extent of telling them the exact time if you choose to, or that's a setting with the uLaw, or you can choose not to tell them that time. Telephone conversation for 24 minutes, you're charging them that. And now you also have Mr. Wolverine Jackman, who's L2 or a lawyer, and you can update his profession within his contact information. Now he charges at $200 an hour, and he spent an hour for a total of $435 plus taxes in Ontario. And then you had the meals for the particular file. You can update the description. That was the total disbursement, adding to a total of $499.31. Okay? Now you can accept that payment of $499.31, provide a receipt, a check number 567, put it into your general account, give them a receipt, and hit apply. Okay? Now, since all this effort has gone into it, let's say at the end of the week or end of the month, the owner of the firm, Mr. Roger Moore, wants to come back and look at, okay, what's the overall effort that has been contributed by my team? Okay, so he probably wants to check on the individual effort as a timesheet, right? We earlier spoke about that. So let me generate the receipt, the payment receipt for the client. I can even upload that receipt document into my Google Drive folder so that all that document is now available in one central place specific to that file. You could have also done the same thing with the invoice. so that's very chronological. Okay. So the next step in the whole process is to consider, as the owner of the firm, how do I now understand all the effort put in by these different contributors? Okay. So for that, let me go back into uLaw. I'm logged in as Mr. Roger Moore. Now I have access to our calendar system. Now Roger Moore can actually set up various different color codes for the individual users in his firm. Okay, that's a very simple component of the calendar settings in your settings tab. So right now we've set up the color red for the assistant, blue for Roger Moore himself, and we've got a darkish black indigo blue for Mr. Wolverine. So in fact, he had two, one at 1 and one at 118. Okay. So I can actually generate right under here the timesheet by employee. Okay, so let me just go ahead and do initially the timesheet by employee, and I will do it for the month of February. Now this document talks based on the individual contributor or professional in the firm, the effort that they've put in by day. So if you were to consider the day, you see how you've got Mr. Roger Moore, had Mr. Humpty Dumpty, about 24 minutes. Now comes the assistant Rogue, and she obviously had an 8 a.m. initial phone intake at 8 a.m. this morning. And then you've got Wolverine Jackman, who had Mr. Humpty Dumpty's court visit at 1 p.m., followed by another court visit for Mr. Amphilbert. Okay? Not only can you do that, you can also look at the revenue brought in by the employee. You can say, I want the revenue by employee, again, for this particular month. The first timesheet talked about the time. It in fact does have a very nice summary at the end as well. If you go down further, it clearly tells you Roger Moore had estimated to spend about 7 hours. He had billed 8 hours. Ms. Rogue had an hour and 54 minutes, but she spent an hour and 30 was what she billed. And Mr. Wolverine had estimated of 2 hours, and he has billed the 2 hours. Okay? So this really talks about the time spent in the month of February by the 3 different individuals in this firm. If I look at the revenue by employee, this has the one additional information is based on their rate, how much of revenue did they bring in to the firm. Okay? So here's the extra column, and the big comparison between this and this is you have this extra column of revenue, which is based on the multiplication factor of their rate, flat rate, various combinations. You've got $2,500 contributed by Mr. Roger Moore, got about $200 revenue from Mr. Wolverine. Okay? So not only were you able to collaborate on a particular file as a team, the owner of the firm now also has greater control over the revenue and the time spent by these individuals across the firm. Okay? With another 5 more minutes in our presentation, the last component of the whole multi-user firm collaborative exercise that I want to talk about is how can the firm now work with a third-party bookkeeper, okay, or an accountant. Not often do you see law firms do their own bookkeeping accounting. With obviously, if you have legal accounting software, and if you have the time to put in all the data, obviously you can be very self-sufficient. You don't technically need a bookkeeper. But if you're busy, don't have the time, but have the money to spend, and you're spending it on a bookkeeper, being smart about it. Now, you've heard of the story of dropping off all the bills so that accountant personnel can come into your office, look at all your expenses, bills you've had for that particular month, so that it helps with reconciling your different accounts. Let's take a simple example of how you could extend the same use case of uLaw and now also provide access to someone who's not in your firm. Okay, this could be a bookkeeper accountant, and let me show you, and that's another access point. So in uLaw, within the permission model, if you realized earlier on, we have a particular user role called the accountant. So you could basically say, I'm going to give access to my accountant for accessing reports, my documents, no access to my calendar, but of course I have no access to matter, contacts, right? Just the accounts. Just give the accountant the access to that. So now I'm going to log in. You can see this hello accountant. I'm logged in as the accountant. This could be, as I said, a uLaw bookkeeper, could be a third-party bookkeeper from a different company. Doesn't matter. Let's take the situation where you're, again, doing the same thing, dropping off expenses, or you're collaborating for them to do your work. This particular accountant can actually log into your own uLaw world right from their office. They don't have to come to your office to get the information. They could be on the phone with you, just figuring out what happened that particular month. And then you could see, you could have restricted access for that accountant into your uLaw world. I'm going to click sign up just to show you. Okay. I'm going to say Roger, practice. I chose the wrong day to have a bad internet day. I'm going to sign out of this. I'm now logging in as the accountant. As I said, the purpose of today's demo, we've named the username as .accountant. This could be a first name, last name as well. We'll just give it a couple of more minutes. I apologize for the slight delay. But again, we're at the end of the presentation. So the last use case I just want to show you is how do a law firm work with a third-party bookkeeper. We're going to take a very similar example of the law firm scanning the expenses that they've had. In the first instance that we looked at a disbursement, right? We looked at how specific to a file you had emails. Now you could also have expenses from an office expense standpoint. So we're going to talk about, it's a very similar experience where you can actually scan a copy of your receipt and have your accountant access that information and add it as an office expense. Okay. Okay. First thing first, if you actually go in, the accountant has access to the accounts. But if they click on matters, they don't have access to that. Click on contacts, no access to that. So you can now help the bookkeeper or accountant be very focused on just one area, which is generating any financial expense related or other reconciliation set of documents if they want them to generate it on a monthly basis. Okay? Now you also have this particular tab within accounts called documents. You can integrate that with your Google Drive as well. So look how you have uLawPractice and you have a subfolder called Matter. We also have another subfolder called Accounts. Okay? And then you can create your further subfolders for 2018, 2019. Okay? And you can see the current month of February being available. And if I go into that particular folder, you don't see there's any file right now. So for purpose of the demo, behind the scene, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick snapshot using my phone as Mr. Roger Moore of a office expense. Okay? So I'm going to say airport parking expense. Let's say this was a office expense that I had incurred as the owner of this firm. I'm just going to put it in and save it. And what the accountant does is, assuming there it is, right away that information is available to them. They can even open it. So imagine having a discipline of just scanning expenses as and when they happen and just putting it into the particular month in which it happened. So there's the $50 with the pre-tax and tax. Now the bookkeeper, at the leisure of, Magneto in this case, at the leisure of his, wherever he's working from, he could just go in and, knowing that this was the only expense that occurred today, he could just go in and say, all right, this could be parking or just travel. There it is. You can just say travel and say parking expense. For a total of $50, so we automatically calculate the pre-tax $44.25 and the tax. You can say this to Toronto Airport. Again, paid out of the business credit card. And again, if you have the reference number, you can put that in. There it is. 663282. And hit submit. So now what you've done is you've made it possible for your bookkeeper to be totally independent and be still collaborative in working with you at the leisure of their home, makes their cost more effective. They don't have to travel to your firm to get this expense. And as and when you have expenses, you can just scan that particular receipt and just throw it in here, with just a more smarter way of labeling it so that it's easier for your bookkeeper, or if this is your assistant who's doing it, or even if it's yourself doing it, you can have that discipline and have that collaborative exercise as well. Okay? So we do and I think I've taken slightly longer than we originally bargained. So hopefully this helped give you an understanding of a multi-user firm environment or an ecosystem of how individuals within a firm beyond a sole practitioner's perspective can collaborate on a particular matter within a firm, can also collaborate for business-related activities, and how you as the owner have complete control over the user permissions and access points, but also have total control over the data that's required for you to make informed business decisions about who is collaborating, who's doing a great job, and how much are these individuals contributing to the success of your growing firm. Okay. So with that, I will stop the recording